Imagine you wake up one morning and something is just off. No alarm from your window, no sparrows bickering in the gutter, no crow yelling at a trash can. The sky is this huge, empty blue ceiling with nothing moving across it. You step outside and it's quiet. In a way that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong, like someone muted the planet. You'd think, okay, weird, maybe it's just you. But the silence follows you. No pigeons explode off the sidewalk when you walk past. No gulls circling the parking lot. No swallows skimming the lake. The traffic still roars. People still talk. But that thin, invisible layer of birdsong and wing beats that usually wraps around everything? Gone. Give it a few weeks and the world starts to glitch. Insects boom in number. Clouds of mosquitoes and flies where there used to be flocks. Crops take a hit because there are no little feathered workers pollinating here, eating pests there, doing free farm labor we never really thanked them for. Along the highways and in the savannah, carcasses lie a bit longer, swelling and stinking, because there are no vultures, no crows, no sharp-eyed scavengers to strip them clean. Forests shift in slow motion. Seeds that once hitched rides in bird guts or stuck to feathers just fall and rot under the parent tree. Over years, whole hillsides change color and shape as some plants vanish and others take over. It's like someone edited birds out of the movie of Earth, but forgot to fix the rest of the script. Now here's the twist. This almost happened already. Birds are not some separate, delicate group of sky creatures. They are what's left of the dinosaurs. Modern birds are living theropods, cousins of Velociraptor, the only branch that slipped through the mass extinction that wiped out almost everything else with scales and teeth. Believe it or not, they survived by doing one thing over and over, changing. Instead of freezing in one perfect design, one strange lineage kept reshaping itself, turning hollow bones, beaks, and feathers into the evolutionary version of Tinker Toys. Penguins basically became fake seals, trading flight for flipper wings and dense bones so they could fly underwater. Giant eagles in New Zealand turned into wolf-level predators from the sky. On islands, little rails ditched flying altogether and started living like rabbits and tiny grazing mammals. So here's the mystery I want you to sit with. Why do birds keep morphing into things that look and behave like totally different animals? Why do they keep reinventing themselves as seals, as wolves, as ground sloths, even as dinosaur-style predators again? And what if I told you that right now, in our cities and warming oceans, new bird forms are already being forged, faster than we can name them? Speaking of, let's get back to it, because in this video, we're going to count down some of the strangest bird lineages that broke all the rules of birdness, and see how the changes we're making to the planet might be pushing them toward their next radical shapes. So, to really understand how weird birds can get, we have to start with the plot twist. You're already living in the age of dinosaurs. Yeah, you heard me right. Every pigeon, every crow, every smug little seagull stealing your fries is a dinosaur that never checked out. Modern birds are the last surviving branch of a group called theropods, the same general crew that gave us Velociraptor and T-Rex. Imagine something raptor-sized, lightweight, covered in feathers, sprinting through Jurassic undergrowth about 150 million years ago. That's the kind of creature your backyard robin is descended from. Not from Triceratops, not from some giant swamp lizard, but from small, fast, razor-clawed hunters that just kept shrinking and fluffing out. You'd think the dinosaurs that survived the asteroid were the big, tough ones. Nope. When that rock hit 66 million years ago, the celebrities died first. T. Rex, Triceratops, All the massive, slow-breeding giants, gone. The survivors were the rare, tiny, feathered tree dwellers, animals that could hide, eat almost anything, and already glide or flap between branches. Being small, adaptable, and semi-bird-like wasn't cute. It was a life insurance policy. And those survivors had a secret weapon, a body plan that's basically evolution's Tinker Toy set. Hollow bones make them light but strong, so you can stretch, shrink, and bend the skeleton without breaking the whole design. Feathers started out as insulation and display, then got repurposed into airfoils, parachutes, even swim paddles. Beaks? They're like biological multi-tools. Swap the shape, and suddenly the same dinosaur lineage can crack seeds, sip nectar, rip flesh, or filter plankton. Believe it or not, that flexibility lets birds invade jobs we usually think belong to totally different animals. Give one lineage enough time and you get penguins, which basically turned into fake seals with flipper wings, dense bones, and a tuxedo. Another lineage becomes hummingbirds, tiny hovering nectar bats with jet fighter maneuvering. Ostriches go the other way and become two-legged feathered antelopes sprinting across the savanna. Vultures? They're doing the cleanup crew role you'd expect from hyenas or wild dogs, just with wings and a much more dramatic entrance. And this keeps happening. Over and over, on islands, in oceans, even in cities, birds try on new roles: cat, seal, grazing mammal, sometimes almost dinosaur again. Their bodies are so modular that evolution can just keep snapping pieces into new configurations. So if one dinosaur lineage already reinvented itself as hummingbirds, penguins, ostriches, and vultures, what else could it become next, especially on a planet we're heating, paving, and filling with trash? Because, guys, one of the absolute best things you can do to see evolution in real time is just watch birds living around us. The real question is, which of these living dinosaurs is already mid-transformation, and what are they turning into now? So if birds are mid-transformation, what are they actually working with under the hood? Because to understand how they keep turning into other animals, you need the basic bird toolkit, and it's way more upgradable than you'd think. First, the skeleton. Birds run on a lightweight, mostly hollow bone system. Sounds fragile, right? But those bones are reinforced inside like tiny scaffolding, so you get strength without the weight. On top of that, a lot of their bones are fused together into a rigid frame. The wrist, the hand, parts of the spine, even the pelvis are locked into these solid units that make the whole body behave like a single stable wing platform. Then there's the keeled sternum, that big blade of bone on the chest where the flight muscles attach. Imagine a built-in anchor for a pair of biological jet engines. If evolution wants a flying falcon, it loads that keel with muscle. If it wants a running ostrich, it dials the flight muscles down and shifts power into the legs. Same part, different setting. Now, the headliner. No teeth, just a beak. You'd think losing teeth would be a downgrade. Believe it or not, it's one of the biggest hacks in the whole design. Teeth are heavy. They need big jaws and a lot of time to grow. A beak is light, grows continuously, and is controlled by a handful of developmental genes that can be tweaked pretty fast. What if I told you that tiny changes in those genes can turn one basic beak into almost anything? A hummingbird's beak is basically a nectar straw. A hawfinch has a built-in nutcracker. Woodpeckers get a chisel with shock absorbers in the skull, while herons carry a spear. With just that one structure, birds can steal jobs from bats, rodents, and even small primates, all by changing the shape and strength of the beak. Feathers are the same story. Originally, they were probably for insulation and flashy displays like, "Look at me, I'm warm and fabulous." Only later were they co-opted for powered flight. And then evolution went, "Cool, what else can we do with this?" Penguins turned their feathers and wings into a wetsuit and flippers for underwater flying. Owls use super soft, fringed feathers to muffle the sound of air over the wing, so they can glide over prey like a ghost. One tool, at least 3 completely different jobs. On top of that, birds breed fast and travel far. Short generation times mean mutations get tested quickly. Long wings mean those experiments get scattered across islands, mountaintops, and random patches of forest. Isolate a small group on an island, give them a few thousand years, and suddenly your normal songbird is halfway to being a weird ground mammal. And some lineages didn't stop halfway. In the next part, we're going to meet birds that pushed this basic toolkit so far they barely feel like birds anymore. Fake seals, sky tigers, and a few creatures that look suspiciously like dinosaurs making a comeback. So let's start with the birds that basically rage quit being birds. Imagine the Southern Ocean, freezing winds knifing across the water, waves the size of buildings, months of darkness where the sun just gives up and doesn't bother showing. It's one of the harshest places on Earth, and big, warm-blooded mammals struggle to make a living out there. You'd think seals and whales would have that whole space locked down, right? Thick blubber, powerful flippers, built-in wetsuits. But for a long stretch of evolutionary time, those classic marine mammals were rare, or just not around in the far south. And in that gap, a bunch of flying seabirds quietly found a loophole. If you can't compete in the air, dive into the water and take the fish from below. Their ancestors looked more like today's petrels and albatrosses, skimming the waves on long wings. At first, they just dove a little deeper, swam a little longer. But generation after generation, wings that were good for flying became better for paddling. Hollow, delicate bones got thicker and heavier so they wouldn't float up like corks. Muscles shifted, feathers packed tighter, and a layer of fat started building under the skin as natural insulation. Believe it or not, that slow, relentless tweaking is what built penguins. Birds that cannot fly at all, with wings that have turned into stiff, flipper-like blades. Their bones are dense like a small seal's. Their bodies are torpedo-shaped, so when they shoot through the water after fish or krill, they're more like feathered bullets than anything you'd see perched in a tree. Functionally, a penguin is a budget seal in a tuxedo. Same basic job description: streamlined body, underwater agility, chasing schools of prey in icy water. They rely on a mix of blubber and insanely good feathers for warmth. Each feather locks together like tiny roof tiles, trapping air so well that water barely touches their skin. On land, they wobble around like someone forgot to finish the design. But the second they dive, you're watching a marine predator, not the cartoon bird from the gift shop mug. And yeah, you heard me right. They are still absolutely 100% birds. No flight, no perching, no graceful tree landings. But genetically, they're dinosaurs in good standing, just ones that signed up for a fully marine, almost mammal-like lifestyle. How's that for a body plan that refuses to stay in its lane? So if evolution can turn a flying dinosaur into a fake seal in the ocean, what happens when you give birds something even stranger? A whole empty continent, almost no big land predators, and millions of years to experiment? In the next part, we're going to meet what happens when birds stop pretending to be seals and start auditioning for the roles of wolves, big cats, and, honestly, land dinosaurs all over again. That dorm. So when birds get that kind of blank evolutionary checkbook on land, what actually happens? Imagine hitting reset on an entire continent and asking, okay, who wants to audition for wolf, deer, and rat? Welcome to the island rule. It's this weird pattern biologists kept noticing. Put animals on isolated islands with almost no big predators and very few competitors, and they start breaking all the size rules. Tiny things blow up into giants, big things shrink down, and a lot of creatures evolve really strange behaviors because, well, they can. No tigers, no bears, no problem. And birds are perfect for this game, because they're really good at getting to islands in the first place. You'd think oceans would be these huge "do not cross" signs. Nope. One storm, one long migration, one lost flock, and suddenly a couple of pigeons or rails are standing on a brand new island that has forests, beaches, plants everywhere, and absolutely no mammals doing the usual jobs. No wolves chasing, no deer grazing, no rodents nibbling seeds at night. In that kind of empty stage, evolution looks around and goes, "Guess we're using birds for everything." Natural selection starts nudging them, generation after generation, into those vacant roles. Some give up flying and become chunky ground-dwelling grazers. Some turn into sprinting, flightless runners. Some even bulk up into giant apex predators, the closest thing that island will ever have to big cats or land crocodiles. Same basic bird blueprint, totally different animals. Take the dodo. Yeah, you heard me right. The world's most famous punchline was basically a pigeon turned pig. Its ancestors were normal flying pigeons that reached Mauritius. With no mammal predators around, they got heavy, lost flight, and wandered the forest floor snacking on fallen fruit, seeds, probably anything vaguely edible. Big body, strong beak, zero fear of anything. It wasn't trying to be cute. It was filling the island's clumsy forest pig niche. Then you've got the moas in New Zealand. Imagine a bird so big it could look you in the eye, and then keep going. Some species stood around 3.5 meters tall. These guys were essentially feathered browsing deer and giraffes rolled into one, walking through forests, stripping leaves, reshaping the plants around them. No native land mammals doing that job? Fine. Birds will handle it. Rails did something different. Over and over, on islands all over the world, these small, usually secretive birds landed, found no ground mammals, and turned into them. They shrank wings, got chunkier legs, started scurrying around like feathered rodents, digging through leaf litter, eating insects and seeds. Believe it or not, some islands had entire, small mammal communities made almost entirely of rail species. But one island bird didn't stop at pig, deer, or rodent. What if I told you it evolved into something so massive and terrifying that local people told stories about it as if it were a land-based dragon? And those stories were only half exaggeration? So let's land on the island that took that dragon idea and actually ran with it. Prehistoric New Zealand was basically a parallel universe. No native land mammals, no deer, no wolves, not even mice running around in the undergrowth. Instead, you had forests full of giant, flightless moa, some of them over 3 meters tall, just walking salad bars on legs. And above them? The sky was ruled by an eagle the size of a small human. This was Haast's eagle, and you'd think calling a bird human-sized is YouTube exaggeration, right? Not this time. This creature had a wingspan pushing 3 meters, but the really wild part wasn't the wings. It was the body. Thick, muscular legs, ankles built like a powerlifter's, talons as big as tiger claws, literally up to 10 centimeters long, curving like meat hooks, and a massive hooked beak, heavy and deep, built to tear straight through moa flesh and crack open ribs. Imagine you're a moa for a second. You're browsing leaves, minding your own business, because what's going to eat you on an island with no big cats? Then, out of the canopy, this feathered missile drops at almost 80 kilometers an hour and slams into your back with the force of a cinder block. Haast's eagle didn't just poke at its prey like a cute bird of prey poster. It drove those talons between the ribs, into the lungs, into the spine, like a lion's jaws made of knives. Functionally, this thing was New Zealand's lion, tiger, and wolf all rolled into one animal that just happened to have feathers. It was the apex predator on land, filling the job big cats usually do. It ambushed from above, used surprise instead of a chase across open plains, and it was absolutely strong enough to kill a child or seriously injure an adult. Believe it or not, early Polynesian settlers probably learned very fast that the forest canopy itself could hit back. We know it's not just myth because the fossils back it up. Paleontologists have dug up huge leg bones, claws, and skull fragments that match the size and power described in Maori oral traditions. Those stories talk about a giant man-eating bird, the puakai or hokioi, a monster that swooped down and carried people off. Yeah, you heard me right. The local boogeyman lines up almost perfectly with the skeletons in the ground. And the timeline is uncomfortably recent. Haast's eagle probably vanished only 500 to 600 years ago, once humans hunted the moa into extinction. Lose the giant prey, and the giant predator collapses right behind it. One moment, dragon eagle. A few human lifetimes later, gone. How's that for a reminder that a bird can basically cosplay as a big cat until we pull one thread and the whole system unravels? Now, imagine flipping that script completely. Instead of a bird turning into a sky lion, what if a humble island pigeon tried to become a grazing pig? Same basic dinosaur blueprint, totally different animal impression. And this next bird didn't just look the part. It walked, ate, and lived like a feathered farm animal with no farm in sight. On paper, the dodo is a punchline. In reality, it's one of the strangest experiments evolution ever ran on a very normal bird. Imagine taking a city pigeon, dropping it on a tropical island with no mammalian predators, and just letting it cook for a couple million years. You'd think that would give you a slightly nicer pigeon. Maybe a cooler color scheme, a better song, something you might actually want in the park. What Mauritius got instead was a feathered beak-faced pig that forgot how to fly and started waddling around like it owned the place. Because the dodo wasn't some fantasy creature. It was a pigeon. A heavily modified, island-cursed pigeon whose ancestors flew in from Asia or Africa, landed on Mauritius, and found a world with no dogs, no cats, no monkeys, no humans. No land mammals hunting them at all. For a bird, that's like winning the evolutionary lottery and getting free rent on top. So the wings? Optional. Over time, those strong flying muscles shrank. The wings became little paddles, and all that saved energy went somewhere else. Into a bulky body, thick bones, and those chunky drumstick legs built for stomping around the forest floor. This was a ground-dwelling bird, pushing 10-20 kilos, closer in vibe to a small pig or a clumsy little ungulate than to its sleek sky rat cousins. And the head. That beak was serious hardware, curved, deep, and powerful, like someone put a nutcracker on a parrot. Believe it or not, it wasn't just for show. The dodo was probably crunching fruits, seeds, tough nuts, maybe even grabbing crabs and other small animals along the shore. Same dinosaur blueprint, totally different job. Not a flyer, not a singer, but a forest grazer and forager, an honorary mammal wrapped in feathers. Losing flight is a pattern with island birds. When you don't need to burn insane calories staying airborne just to avoid being eaten, you can reinvest that energy. You grow bigger. You lay more eggs. You put resources into survival and reproduction instead of constant takeoff mode. Penguins did it and became fake seals. New Zealand rails did it and turned into little feathered mice. The dodo did it and turned into a walking lunch. Because here's the catch. That same specialization that made the dodo so unique also made it fragile. The moment humans showed up in the late 1500s, the script flipped. We hunted them. We cut the forests. We brought pigs, rats, and monkeys that raided nests and outcompeted this slow, trusting bird-pig hybrid that had never seen a predator in its life. Within about a century, it was gone. Extinct. An entire experiment in what if a pigeon became a pig, erased almost as soon as we noticed it existed. How's that for a brutal review? And if pigeons can become pigs and eagles can become lions, what happens when small, shy birds lose flight over and over again on islands all around the world? Yeah, you heard me right. Evolution keeps rerunning that story, and some of the strangest results are still alive. For now. So let's talk about the birds that keep trying to become tiny mammals, over and over again, like evolution is stuck on repeat. I'm talking about rails. These are small, secretive marsh birds that most of you have probably never seen, even if they're living right next to you. They slip between reeds, whisper instead of shout, and you'd think a bird like that would just stay hidden in wetlands forever. But imagine this. A storm blows in. A few rails get picked up like little feathered hitchhikers, and they get dumped on some random island in the middle of the ocean. No mammals, no foxes, no rats, no cats. Just plants, bugs, maybe some lizards, and a whole lot of empty jobs in the ecosystem. What do the rails do? They move in. They're actually really good at colonizing islands because they can fly long distances when they have to. But once they arrive, something wild keeps happening. Over and over again, on islands all around the world, rails independently lose the ability to fly. Wings shrink, breast muscles soften, and they turn into ground-foraging insect eaters or seed eaters that look and act way more like little rodents than like the delicate marsh birds they came from. Believe it or not, rails have evolved flightlessness more than any other bird group we know of. We're talking dozens of times. Different islands, different species, same basic outcome. A chunky, low-to-the-ground bird sprinting through the undergrowth, picking up beetles and fallen seeds like a mouse with feathers. How's that for evolution hitting copy and paste? On some islands, they basically became the stand-in for rats. On others, they filled the role of shrews or tiny grazing mammals. If you squinted at their tracks, you might not even guess a bird made them. And this didn't just happen once in some obscure place. It happened in the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic, even remote atolls you've never heard of. But there's a catch. These rail-turned mammal analogs are amazing in a world without real mammals, and painfully fragile once the real thing shows up. As humans spread, we brought rats, cats, dogs, pigs, and we hunted. The result? Many of these unique creatures vanished almost instantly. Some are only known from subfossil bones dug out of caves, or from a sailor's note about a small tame bird that runs underfoot, written a few years before it disappeared. What if I told you we basically walked into a natural experiment that had been running for millions of years and kicked over the test tubes? And here's the twist. Evolution clearly loves rerunning this rail experiment when the conditions are right. So the big question is, are we watching a brand new version of that experiment start right now in our own cities, with birds quietly reshaping themselves around us while we're scrolling on our phones. Well, imagine this. The next big evolutionary laboratory isn't some lost island or remote jungle. It's the bus stop outside your apartment, the supermarket parking lot, that scruffy tree wedged between two glass towers. Modern cities are basically artificial islands, patches of concrete and steel cut off from the wild mainland, with their own weird food sources, predators, noise, and light. Instead of fruiting trees and seasonal insects, you've got overflowing trash cans, drive-through fries, and year-round bird feeders. Instead of owls and foxes, you've got cats, cars, and kids with scooters. Evolution looks at that and goes, "Cool, new level unlocked." And birds. Birds showed up early to the party. Take blackbirds in Europe. You'd think a blackbird is a blackbird, right? Same species, same song. Nope. City blackbirds have shorter wings, which makes them more agile in tight streets and between buildings, and their beaks are subtly different, tuned for picking food off pavement and feeders instead of probing forest leaf litter. They even sing higher-pitched songs so their calls can cut through traffic noise, like they've all become tiny opera singers just to be heard over the rush hour. Pigeons are doing their own version of this city makeover. Believe it or not, those so-called rats with wings are one of the most successful urban animals on Earth. Their bodies are trending towards stockier builds, with strong legs for walking and dodging, instead of long distance flight wings. Some populations show shifts in beak shape that make it easier to peck at flat human food. They're not broken doves that forgot how to be wild. Pattern interrupt here. No, your local pigeon is not a failed bird. It's an in-progress design, being sculpted to live on ledges, scaffolding, and subway platforms as if the city itself was a cliff face. House sparrows are changing too. In several cities, they breed earlier in the year than their rural cousins, matching their schedule to artificial light and constant food. Their stress hormones, their immune systems, even their skull and beak proportions are shifting along an urban-rural gradient. What if I told you that walking a single mile out of town can mean stepping through a living time-lapse of evolution, from hardcore city specialists back to more traditional field birds? On top of that, city birds are evolving something you can see without a microscope: attitude. Many urban populations are bolder, calmer around humans, and more tolerant of noise and light pollution. That skittish forest thrush becomes a street-smart animal that will hop between your shoes for crumbs. Over generations, natural selection quietly favors the birds that don't panic at every car horn and don't waste energy fleeing every stroller. Give this process long enough, and you don't just get city versions of the same bird. You get lineages that might eventually be unable to survive outside the urban jungle at all. Imagine a future where there are true city sparrows that can't handle real darkness, or tower pigeons that only nest on skyscrapers, like our own homemade city mammals in bird form. And if that sounds far-fetched, remember, we've already watched islands turn birds into fake seals, ground grazers, and giant predators. Cities are just the newest islands. So the real question is, what happens when we crank the speed up even more? Well, what if I told you some birds aren't just becoming fake mammals? They're quietly drifting back toward being dinosaurs. Yeah, you heard me right. Imagine walking through a forest and realizing the top predator around you isn't a wolf, or a cat, or even a snake. It's a bird. On a lot of islands, when the classic big land predators never show up, birds step into that job, and some of them end up looking and hunting like something that escaped from the late Jurassic. take New Zealand's adzabil. This thing was not your delicate little songbird. It was a chunky, flightless tank with a massive chisel-shaped beak, heavy legs, and a skull that looks uncomfortably close to a small theropod dinosaur. It stomped around the forest floor, smashing through leaf litter, probably ripping open logs and grabbing lizards, insects, maybe even other birds. You'd think you were looking at a weird land mammal, but the skeleton is basically screaming, "Dinosaur lineage reporting for duty." And it wasn't alone in that vibe. Some extinct island owls did the same thing from the night shift. Instead of silently swooping from the sky, they hunted mostly on the ground, with long legs and reduced wings, chasing prey through undergrowth like a feathered cat. Picture those big forward-facing eyes, hooked beak, and murder mittens for feet, but now put them at ankle height, sprinting after you. How's that for a reminder that birds still have raptor software running in the background? Now, just to be clear, evolution doesn't literally hit rewind. We're not getting a perfect replay of Velociraptor with a fresh coat of feathers. What's happening is that when you put a bird into the same kind of job its dinosaur ancestors once had, top land predator, mid-sized ambush hunter, whatever, similar pressures sculpt the body in similar ways. Long legs for running, strong neck for striking, serious claws for grabbing. Different path, same general shape. Believe it or not, this means birds aren't only cosplaying as seals and grazing mammals. Sometimes they circle back toward their own deep past. They reoccupy those dinosaur-like niches that vanished when the non-bird dinosaurs died out, as if evolution keeps testing. Can a bird fill this role again? And a lot of the time, the answer is yes. So if land birds can echo ground-stalking raptors, what happens when you look up and out to sea? Are some of those soaring, long-winged species slowly drifting toward something pterodactyl-like? Are our diving birds and penguins the opening act for a new wave of sea reptiles built out of feathers instead of scales? In other words, are we watching the next generation of dragons and sea monsters evolve in real time, and just calling them birds because we don't know what they'll become yet? So if some birds are drifting toward dragons and sea monsters, what about the ones that turned into wolves and hyenas? In the sky. Imagine looking up and realizing the top predators and scavengers over your head are playing the same game as lions and foxes on the ground, just with feathers and hollow bones. Start with the cleanup crew. Vultures and condors are basically sky hyenas. They don't chase living prey much. They cruise on huge wings, scanning miles of savanna, desert, or mountains for anything dead. When they find a carcass, they drop in like grim parachutes, rip it open with hooked beaks, and vacuum up the mess. You'd think that sounds gross, right? But they're doing exactly what land scavengers do: stopping disease, recycling nutrients, and patrolling territories so big a wolf pack would need a car and a gas card to keep up. These aerial wolves even split jobs the way mammals do. Some species arrive first and tear through tough hide. Others are specialists for bones or softer scraps. It's the same division of labor you see with jackals, hyenas, and other carnivores, just lifted 1,000 meters into the air. Believe it or not, when vultures vanish from an ecosystem, rabies and anthrax cases can spike because feral dogs and rats move in to eat what the sky hyenas use to clean. Then, when the sun goes down, the night shift clocks in. Owls are basically flying cats, forward-facing eyes for depth perception, radar-level hearing, and that silent flight that feels like a cheat code. Their feathers have tiny serrations that break up air turbulence, so they can glide in without a whisper, grab a mouse, and be gone before it even processes the shadow overhead. What if I told you some owls can locate prey under snow just by hearing it shuffle? Foxes and wildcats do the same thing with ears and whiskers. Different toolkit, same job. Small, nocturnal mammal assassin. And not every sky mammal copy is noble. Some are pirates, skuas, frigate birds, and their cousins are the aerial thieves of the ocean. They harass other seabirds mid-flight, yank on their tails, body slam them until the victim panics and drops its hard-earned fish. Then the pirate just snatches the free-falling snack. It's the bird version of a hyena mobbing a cheetah or a klepto-raccoon stealing from your trash can. No honor, just results. The wild part is that all this evolved multiple times. Hawks and eagles became daytime pursuit predators. Owls, from a totally different lineage, reinvented the stealthy mammal hunter at night. Vultures turned into corpse specialists. Same sky, same basic bird body, but evolution keeps remixing them into wolf, hyena, fox, even raccoon roles. But while these sky wolves and night raptors perfected life in the air, another group of birds quietly made a very different choice. They started giving up flight altogether, trading feathers for flippers and heading back into the water to become something that looks a lot less like a bird and a lot more like a marine reptile. And nowhere is that not very bird energy stronger than in penguins. Imagine taking the basic bird blueprint and just flipping the settings. Light hollow bones? Penguins actually thicken theirs, packing them with extra density to fight buoyancy so they don't bob back to the surface like feathered pool noodles. Flexible wings for soaring? Gone. Instead, they've got stiff, paddle-like flippers that barely bend, built to punch through water the way other birds slice through air. Even the paint job changed. Up top, dark backs that blend into the black depths when you're looking down. Underneath, bright white bellies that vanish into the glare when you're looking up. That countershading is submarine camouflage, the same visual trick used by sharks, tuna, and a lot of old-school marine reptiles. You'd think you're watching a cute bird in a tuxedo. Underwater, it's a stealth missile. And here's where it gets wild. When a penguin dives, it isn't really swimming in the way you or I would think. It's flying underwater. Those flippers beat in a figure-8 pattern, generating lift and thrust, just like wings in the sky. Only now, the sky is liquid. Believe it or not, that motion ends up looking a lot like how some extinct marine reptiles moved, even though they were totally different animals. Take ichthyosaurs, those dolphin-shaped reptiles with giant eyes, or plesiosaurs with their long necks and 4 flippers. Different bodies, different time periods, not birds at all. But functionally? Same problem to solve. How do you turn a land creature into a fast underwater hunter? Streamlined body, powerful flippers, big eyes, dark back, light belly. It's like evolution keeps reusing the same toolkit on repeat. We know penguins pushed this idea even further in the past. Fossils from places like New Zealand show giant penguins nearly human-sized, some over 1.7 meters tall. What if I told you that 50 million years ago, you could have had a bird next to you in the surf that weighed as much as you did and hunted fish like a mid-sized marine predator? Yeah, you heard me right. Quick pattern interrupt here. I once tried to film penguins from a boat, expecting clumsy waddling and adorable belly flops. On land, they delivered. But the second they hit the water, the camera might as well have been off. They just vanished, then rocketed past under the surface like black and white torpedoes. In that moment, they felt less like birds and more like tiny, living submarines. Speaking of, let's get back to it, because that torpedo lifestyle comes at a cost. Penguins gave up almost everything we emotionally attach to birds. No soaring migration, no tree perching, no complex songs drifting across a forest at dawn. In exchange, they got thick insulation, layers of fat, hyper-efficient flippers, and the ability to own some of the coldest oceans on Earth. And this is the bigger pattern I want you to see. When the environment is right, birds don't just tweak their beaks, they reinvent the whole body plan. Penguins are what happens when a dinosaur lineage tries to become a marine reptile, and actually pulls it off. So if birds can fake being seals and plesiosaurs, what else can they turn into when evolution really leans in? So if birds can fake being seals and plesiosaurs, what else can they turn into when evolution really leans in? Imagine shrinking things down, leaving the ocean, and asking a simple question. Who's going to do all the fiddly, bitey, nut-cracking work that rodents and monkeys usually handle? You'd think the answer would always be mammals with nice, flexible paws and sharp little teeth. Nope. A lot of the time, it's birds with supercharged beaks. Finches, parrots, and corvids have basically taken the standard bird face and turned it into a Swiss Army knife, part pliers, part nutcracker, part surgical probe. One bone toolkit, doing the jobs of both hands and rodent incisors. Darwin's finches are the classic example. On the Galapagos, one original finch shows up and then explodes into over a dozen species, each with a beak tuned to a different food. Thick, conical beaks that can crack brutal, armor-plated seeds. Long, narrow ones that can tease insects out of cactus spines. Even a vampire finch with a sharp, probing beak that pecks boobies until they bleed, and then drinks the blood, as if evolution looked at a tiny songbird and said, "Yeah, you heard me right. You're a mini vampire now." That's the same kind of diet spread you see in small mammals, just rebuilt with keratin instead of enamel. Parrots take it even further. Watch a macaw climbing a tree, and it doesn't move like a normal bird at all. It hooks its beak into the bark, pulls its whole body up, then uses that curved beak and its zygodactyl feet together like a four-limbed climber. Crack a nut? The beak acts like a bolt cutter. Peel bark? It's a crowbar. Manipulate a seed or fruit. Suddenly, it's behaving more like an arboreal primate than a pigeon, filling that monkey-style niche in some forests without ever growing fingers. And then you have the brainy tool users. Crows and ravens, rooks, New Caledonian crows, even some cockatoos, don't just pick things up with their beaks, they reshape the world. A crow will strip a leaf, trim it, and turn it into a hook. Lab birds have bent straight wires into hooks to fish food out of tubes, no instructions needed. Goffin's cockatoos have whittled wooden wedges to pry open boxes. Believe it or not, that's the kind of problem-solving you usually hear about in apes. So what if I told you this beak-as-hand trick is exactly why birds keep sliding into mammal jobs? If you can swap out teeth and fingers for one adaptable tool, you can chase seeds, insects, fruit, even blood, wherever it shows up. And as climate change scrambles which plants survive, which insects boom, and which small mammals vanish, there's a brutal question hanging over all of this. When those classic mammal roles open up, which birds are going to evolve their beaks next and walk right into them? Because the menu is changing fast, and evolution hates leaving a buffet unattended. And that buffet is getting flipped over in real time. Climate chaos isn't just about hotter summers and weird storms. It's about the entire schedule of life getting scrambled. Flowers bloom too early, insects hatch too late, rains don't show up at all, or they arrive in one giant flood. Imagine trying to run a restaurant when your food delivery just shows up whenever it feels like it. You'd think birds could just flap somewhere else and call it a day, right? Nope. The bugs they eat, the seeds they need, the small animals they hunt are all shifting their ranges too, racing poleward or upslope to chase cooler temperatures and reliable rain. Some forests are drying into scrub, some wetlands are vanishing, and suddenly the old reliable feeding grounds are just empty. So birds are already on the move. We're seeing species creep north year after year or climb higher into mountains, like the map is slowly sliding out from under them. Some migrants are arriving earlier in spring, others are leaving later in autumn, and a few are just giving up on the whole long-distance commute. Believe it or not, there are birds that used to be classic long-haul travelers that now spend the entire year in cities, living off bird feeders, trash, and whatever we plant in our parks. And when ranges shift like that, they leave holes behind. Empty forests, quiet marshes, night skies with no hunters. Those gaps are new niches, the same kind of evolutionary playground we talked about with islands, but now it's happening across whole continents. New competitors move in, old predators disappear, and the rules that kept everyone in their lane for thousands of years suddenly don't apply. What if I told you some lineages are basically auditioning for totally new jobs? As more regions dry out, we could see desert specialists evolve from fairly ordinary songbirds, turning into tough, heat-proof creatures that barely drink, living off seeds and insects that can handle 45-degree heat. In the far north, scavenging gulls and corvids could become Arctic cleanup crews, trailing shrinking ice edges and following dead whales and seals like feathered hyenas. And then there are the cities. Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do if you want to see evolution in fast forward is just watch urban birds. Some blackbirds in European cities already have shorter wings and different beaks than their forest relatives. Pigeons are learning to time traffic lights, crows are dropping nuts in crosswalks, and we're basically building an all-you-can-eat lab for permanent urban dwellers. Yeah, you heard me right. Permanent city birds that almost never see a real forest, desert raptors that act like foxes, polar scavengers that own the shorelines of a warmer Arctic. How's that for a sequel to the dinosaur story? And here's the wild part. We might be watching the very first steps of bird lineages that, a few million years from now, won't even look like the same animals we're filming today. So if climate chaos is the new island, what kind of birds is it about to strand on the shores of the future? So if climate chaos is the new island, here's the twist. We've also turned the entire planet into one giant, messy bird breeding experiment. Not careful, cute dog breeding with pedigrees and ribbons. More like, oops, we paved everything, dumped our trash, and now let's see which creatures can survive the obstacle course. You'd think evolution needs millions of years and untouched wilderness, right? Nope. Walk through any city, and you're basically touring our accidental aviary. Every window, car, street light, and French fry on the sidewalk is a test. Hit the glass? You don't pass on your genes. Learn to spot reflections and time your flight perfectly? Congrats. You just nudged bird evolution a tiny step. Imagine a world where speeding cars are the new top predator. That's not sci-fi. That's the highway. In some places, birds living near busy roads are evolving shorter, rounder wings that let them take off faster and juke out of the way of traffic. Long, elegant gliding wings look great in documentaries, but if you can't clear a truck in time, you're done. So the survivors are the quick launch models, more like feathered fighter jets than soaring angels. And then there's pollution. We don't just change the landscape, we change the air and the grime on every surface. In some polluted cities, darker plumaged birds are doing better, possibly because extra melanin in their feathers helps bind and dump heavy metals and other toxins. Believe it or not, smog is literally painting the winners and losers. Our farms and clear-cuts add another layer. When we turn forests into endless fields and pasture, we create huge open habitats that reward a very specific kind of bird: fast, ground-feeding, bold. Think crows patrolling crop rows, gulls raiding freshly plowed soil, small brown birds sprinting between tractor tracks like tiny, nervous mammals. Behavior-wise, a lot of them start acting less like delicate songbirds and more like rodents with wings, darting, scavenging, grabbing any calorie they can. Pattern interrupt for you. Picture a future nature documentary. Calm voiceover, dramatic music. This was the age of city crows and trash gulls, forged in the shadow of human megacities. Yeah, you heard me right. We're basically writing the script for that episode every time we drop a burger wrapper. And we don't stop at shaping the survivors. We also ship in the assassins. Cats, rats, snakes, mongooses, all the furry and scaly hitmen we've scattered onto islands that never had them. Naive island birds that nest on the ground, don't fly much, or don't fear predators at all. They vanish. The only birds that stand a chance are the ones that get warier, more nocturnal, more flexible, more mammal-like in their paranoia. What if I told you this is just the warm-up for the next phase? Not just which birds survive us, but which ones actually start turning into something else entirely? What if I told you that split is already happening? Not in some distant sci-fi future, but right now, in the pigeons on your sidewalk and the songbirds screaming outside your apartment at 4 a.m. You'd think a blackbird is just a blackbird. Same yellow beak, same dark feathers, same attitude about your car. But imagine lining up a city blackbird and a forest blackbird. At a glance? Twins. Under the hood? They're starting to drift apart. Scientists actually followed European blackbirds that moved into cities and compared them to their forest cousins. The urban birds sing shorter, higher songs that can cut through traffic noise, almost like they've switched from opera to ringtone. They have different stress hormone levels, different timing for breeding, even different daily rhythms so they can feed under streetlights. And when you look at their DNA, you see it. Genetic differences piling up between city and forest. Same story with great tits. These little yellow and black songbirds that should be boringly identical across Europe. In quiet forests, males sing long, rich songs. In noisy cities, they've evolved faster, higher notes, like someone mashing the pitch-up button. Those song changes aren't just style points. Females use them to pick mates. So if you grow up loving one type of song and you think the other sounds wrong, guess what happens? You stop mixing. That is the first crack in the species. Different songs, different timing, different hormones, and now different genes. Over time, that means less interbreeding, more isolation, and two lineages walking down separate evolutionary streets, and the pressure is all coming from us. City birds deal with constant noise, weird light cycles, new predators like cats, and junk food buffets of fries and trash instead of wild berries and insects. Rural birds dodge hawks, not high-rises. They chase seasonal bugs, not year-round bird feeders. Those different challenges reward different bodies, different brains, different instincts. Believe it or not, this is the exact same process that once turned one little branch of dinosaurs into everything from hummingbirds to ostriches. Tiny differences in behavior, in food, in who you're willing to mate with, stretched over thousands or millions of years. And suddenly, your just another bird has become a penguin pretending to be a seal or a giant eagle acting like a skywolf. The only twist now is speed. We've slammed down a new world of concrete forests and chemical oceans in a geological blink, and the birds that can keep up are racing down these new paths. Some will stall out, some will vanish, and some will slide so far from normal bird that they start to look like something else entirely. Yeah, you heard me right. If you zoom in on one extreme case, a bird that hit fast forward and basically turned into a fake mammal in record time, you can really see just how wild and how fast this can go. And you don't even have to go to the ends of the earth to see it starting. You just have to look at a bird that can't quite make up its mind what it wants to be. Imagine a dark shape on a rock, wings spread wide like some budget Batman, just drying. That's a cormorant. Sleek black water bird. Hooked beak, neon eye ring, dives like a torpedo, and then takes off and flies away as if nothing happened. Lifestyle-wise, it's sitting right between a gull and a penguin, a kind of halfway house between sky and sea. You'd think a serious underwater hunter would want the most waterproof feathers on the market, right? Believe it or not, cormorants do the opposite. Their feathers are wettable. Water actually soaks in, which cuts down on trapped air and makes them heavier so they can dive deep after fish. Great for hunting, terrible for staying warm and buoyant. That's why you always see them perched with wings out, literally hanging their laundry out to dry after they've played part-time fake seal. Their bodies tell the same story. Heavier bones than your average airy songbird, powerful legs set back on the body, feet like little paddles. They're not penguins yet, but they're also not exactly graceful when they're trying to walk on land. It's like evolution started filling out the marine mammal application form and then paused halfway. What if I told you evolution didn't even pick one single cormorant design? Around the world, different species lean in different directions. Some are lighter, with longer wings, commuting huge distances between roosts and feeding grounds, acting more like seabird jet pilots. Others are chunkier, with shorter wings and insane dive times, pushing toward that penguin side of the spectrum. Same basic bird, but nudge toward flight or toward fish with every tiny change. Now layer humans on top of that. Fish farms popping up along coasts and lakes. Overfishing stripping wild stocks in some areas, while cages full of easy prey appear in others. Pollution clouding the water, changing which fish survive and how deep they hang out. You can almost feel the evolutionary pressure shifting under their webbed feet. Do you stay a fast, wide-ranging flyer chasing scattered schools, or double down on being a heavy, deep-diving specialist raiding dense, human-made buffets? Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do to see evolution in action is watch a creature like this at the tipping point. Give this lineage a few million years, and today's cormorants could be unrecognizable. Maybe they split into ultra-streamlined, long-distance flyers that barely touch the water. Or maybe some branch slides all the way into the ocean, turns stocky and fur-fat, and ends up as something that looks weirdly like a seal with a beak. And if a normal water bird can be pulled that far off course, wait until you see what happens when a bird goes all in on the fake mammal lifestyle and never looks back. So here's the twist. Birds don't have to grow flippers or fur to start becoming something else. They can fake it first. Evolution often starts with behavior, with a bird just trying something new on a Tuesday afternoon, and only much later does the skeleton, the beak, the genes scramble to keep up. Imagine a heron standing by a pond in a city park. It's not just waiting anymore. People throw bread at ducks all day, so this bird picks up a crust, drops it in the water, and then just watches. Tiny fish rush in, boom, instant buffet. That's not a new species yet, but it is a new hunting style, almost like a fisherman using lures, and the birds that are bold enough or smart enough to pull that trick get more food, more energy, more chicks. You'd think hawks would avoid crowded streets, right? Nope. Some of them now hunt pigeons along alleys and intersections like feathered ambush cats. They use parked cars as cover, streetlights as lookout posts, and time their dives with traffic lights, as if they've memorized the city's heartbeat. That's a bird running a mammal playbook, turning concrete canyons into a savanna made of glass and steel. And gulls? Believe it or not, a lot of them have basically synced their whole day to us. They hit schoolyards at lunchtime, raid parking lots when the drive-through rush starts, and patrol dumpsters right after closing time. They're not just seagulls anymore. They're human pattern gulls, tuned into our schedules the way wolves are tuned into migrating herds. Down on the ground, some city birds have gone full raccoon. Sparrows, starlings, pigeons, even crows pace along gutters and trash bags, not branches and berry bushes. They pry open fast food wrappers, yank noodles from storm drains, and treat overflowing bins like seasonal fruit trees. In terms of lifestyle, these creatures are getting closer to rats and raccoons than to the forest songbirds they're technically related to. Here's why that matters. When behavior shifts and stays shifted, it changes who survives, who mates, and who passes on their genes. Bolder birds, calmer birds, birds with slightly shorter wings that handle tight city turns better, or beaks that crack junk food easier, all get a tiny edge. Give that a few hundred or a few thousand generations, and you don't just have a different attitude, you have a different animal. Quick pattern interrupt. What if I told you there's an urban crow running a daily heist movie over your head? Dawn. It watches commuters, learning which cafe leaves the door propped open. Mid-morning. It lands on the sidewalk, pretends to be harmless, then snatches a dropped muffin and caches it on a rooftop ledge. Afternoon. It follows the garbage truck, hitting fresh bags before the rats arrive. Late day, it swings by a school, waits for kids to toss snacks, and even drops nuts in front of car tires to crack them. That crow isn't just surviving in a city, it's mastering it, and every clever move rewrites which crow brains, wings, and bodies get copied into the future. And if behavior alone can bend evolution this hard, wait until you see what happens when entire bird populations get locked into new worlds with no way back out. Once birds are trapped in those new worlds, scientists basically turn into evolution's paparazzi. We don't just wait a million years and check back in. We follow these creatures, one by one, while they're in the act of changing. Step 1 is simple and kind of old school. Banding. Imagine you're holding a tiny dinosaur in your hand. You slip a coated metal ring or colored band on its leg, and then you let it go. That's it. But when that same bird is caught or spotted 5, 10, even 30 years later, you suddenly know who survived, who migrated farther, who bred earlier, and who just vanished. You'd think that's already pretty intense, but we've upgraded. A lot. Now we've got GPS tags and tiny satellite backpacks that turn individual birds into flying data loggers. A stork pings its location from Africa to Europe. A puffin broadcasts each dive as oceans warm. A city hawk checks in from skyscraper ledges like it's posting stories. From those tracks, you can literally watch migration routes bend, wintering grounds shift north, and see which birds can keep up with the new world and which ones fall off the map. But the real plot twists, they're hiding in the DNA. Two flocks can look almost identical to your eyes, same feathers, same song, same general vibe. Then scientists sequence their genomes and, believe it or not, the code is quietly splitting. City blackbirds, for example, now carry genetic tweaks for shorter wings, different beaks, and altered stress responses compared to their forest cousins. On paper, they're still the same species. Under the hood, they're already on diverging paths. Long-term projects make this really obvious. On islands, researchers have banded and tracked finches, rails, and other birds for decades, watching body size creep up or down as food changes, or wings shrink as predators disappear. In cities, teams follow pigeons, crows, and sparrows year after year, logging earlier breeding, nighttime singing under streetlights, and bolder behavior as these animals turn concrete into their native habitat. In climate-sensitive species, like mountain songbirds and seabirds, timing is everything. Eggs are laid earlier, migrations leave sooner, and the birds that don't adjust simply don't make it. What if I told you that many of the future animals we've been talking about only show up in these spreadsheets and gene files? No dramatic new beak, no sci-fi feathers, just a slightly different migration date, a thicker bill, a new mutation creeping through a population. But stack those tiny changes over 50 years of banding records, GPS tracks, and DNA samples, and you can literally watch a new kind of animal forming in slow motion. And here's the wild part. All this modern surveillance is only half the story. To really prove that birds keep reinventing themselves as totally different animals, we have to dig into a different kind of data set entirely, ancient bones and fossils, where past bird experiments are buried in stone, waiting to show us what comes next. So if the present is one live experiment, the past is a whole warehouse of failed prototypes. And to open it, you don't need a time machine, you just need bones. Let's clear something up first. Fossils and subfossils sound like the same thing, but they're not. A fossil is bone that's been in the ground so long it's basically turned to rock, minerals replacing the original material over millions of years. A subfossil is the in-between stage. The bone is old, dry, stained, sometimes fragile, but still bone. Not quite ancient rock, not exactly fresh leftovers. You'd think bird bones would almost never survive. They're thin, hollow, delicate, right? Believe it or not, some of the best preserved bones on Earth belong to birds that lived on islands, caves, dunes, and peat bogs on places like New Zealand, Hawaii, and Madagascar act like natural filing cabinets. Dry air, stable temperatures, no big scavengers dragging stuff around. A bird dies, slips into a cave pit, and just waits for a paleontologist. When those bones come out of the ground, they don't look like graceful songbirds. Imagine a leg bone as thick as your wrist, or a beak the size of a machete. From just a handful of pieces, scientists can rebuild entire creatures. They scan the bones, compare them to living relatives, and slowly flesh out a body. Muscle here, tendons there, feathers on top. That's how we met the moas of New Zealand, the adzebils, the giant geese of the North Atlantic. Moas were head-high to a human, slow, heavy grazers and browsers, doing the job that deer, antelope, or even small horses do in other places. Adzebils had these thick, chisel-like beaks and powerful legs, probably smashing through undergrowth and stabbing prey like feathered boar wolves. Giant geese waddled around islands as chunky lawnmowers, clipping plants the way sheep would if sheep had wings they never used. On top of that, the fossil record keeps showing us the same weird patterns on repeat. Flightless island birds pop up again and again, rails, ducks, parrots, all independently ditching flight to become ground mammals in everything but DNA. Giant eagles, like New Zealand's Haast's eagle, scaled up until they were taking down human-sized moa, basically playing the role of leopards that just happened to commute by air, And penguin-like divers evolved multiple times too, birds turning their wings into flippers and becoming fake seals that chase fish underwater. What if I told you that means what we see today is just a single frame in a very long movie? All these bird-mammal and bird-dinosaur mashups have already come and gone. Entire casts of strange animals that vanished before we ever pointed a camera at them. And the only reason we know they existed at all is because people hike into remote caves, dig in freezing dunes, and sort through boxes of mystery bones. Speaking of, we're about to jump to something that helps make that kind of fieldwork possible. But it's not what you think, and it definitely isn't buried in stone. And the only reason we know they existed at all is because people hike into remote caves, dig in freezing dunes, and sort through boxes of mystery bones. Speaking of, let me show you what actually survives all that. Because imagine this. It's 5 a.m. It's raining sideways. Your socks gave up on life 3 hours ago, and you're still trying to film a rare bird that absolutely refuses to land anywhere convenient. That's a normal day on these shoots. We're in mud, salt spray, desert heat, sometimes all in the same week, chasing creatures that do not care that the camera battery is at 3%. You'd think the footage is the hard part. Nope. It's keeping yourself and your gear from falling apart while you wait for a penguin to finally torpedo past the lens or a shy rail to poke its head out for half a second. That's where today's sponsor, Fieldcore Gear, comes in. This is the stuff I actually drag through all of that. For me, it's 3 things: the jacket, the pack, and the camera harness. Simple. The Fieldcore shell is light enough that I can hike all day, but it's windproof, rainproof, and, believe it or not, still breathable when you're scrambling up a dune trying not to eat sand. I've had waves break over me, then 10 minutes later I'm dry enough to lie down on the rocks and film. The backpack is basically a mobile field station. Extra padded pocket for the main camera, separate sleeve for the backup body, side slot for the tripod, and a top compartment where I keep notebooks, GPS tags, spare SD cards, and that one fossil brush I always lose. There's even a hidden pocket for your passport and permits, so you don't have that heart attack moment at the airport. And the harness? That's the underrated hero. It keeps the camera tight to your chest on steep climbs, but as soon as a city crow does something weird under a streetlight, you can unclip and be filming in seconds. No digging through bags, no wrestling with straps while the animal just flies off like, yeah, you had your chance. What if I told you the batteries matter just as much? Their field camera setup comes with swappable, weather-sealed batteries that actually last through a full cold morning stakeout. So when we're watching penguins act like fake seals, or scanning tree lines for a silhouette that might be an owl or might be a weird branch, I'm not panicking about the red blinking light. I can just focus on the behavior. Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do if you love this kind of deep dive wildlife stuff is support the brands that let us film it. Fieldcore is giving viewers 20% off your first order if you use the code BIRDLAB at checkout or hit the link in the description. So thank you to Fieldcore Gear for sponsoring this video. Speaking of, let's get back to it, because we're going to need every bit of that gear for the next strange bird that's trying very hard to stop being a bird at all. What if I told you some birds are quietly quitting one of the most dramatic things birds do? I'm talking about migration. Those epic, thousands of kilometers sky road trips. Some species are looking at that and going, yeah, no, I live here now. You'd think a bird that evolved to fly from, say, Northern Europe to Africa every year would be locked into that lifestyle, right? Believe it or not, in a lot of cities, the same species now has 2 versions, the classic long-distance traveler and the stay-at-home crowd that never leaves the neighborhood park. Blackbirds in Europe are a great example. Their wild forest relatives still migrate, but urban blackbirds are starting to stick around all year. And honestly, you can see why. Imagine you're a small bird in a big city. The winters are warmer because of climate change and the urban heat island. There are bird feeders, trash, restaurant patios, and ornamental fruit trees handing out calories like a buffet. Streetlights and billboards stretch the day so you can forage longer. Suddenly, that dangerous cross-continent flight full of storms, predators, and getting lost starts to look less like a heroic journey and more like a terrible vacation package. So the birds that don't migrate can actually come out ahead. They don't burn huge amounts of energy flying thousands of kilometers. They can start breeding earlier in spring because, well, they're already on the territory. They learn every nook and cranny of their city block, where the cat lives, which window kills birds, which human always refills the feeder. Over time, those tiny advantages stack up into something real. Here's the wild part. We're not just talking about behavior, we're talking about evolution. In some of these city populations, non-migratory birds are already showing genetic differences from their migratory cousins. Shorter wings that are better for quick dodges between buildings than for long, efficient glides. Different beak shapes tuned to urban food. Even changes in hormones and timing of reproduction. This is how you split one lifestyle into two lineages. And this is where birds start acting a lot more like mammals. Think about foxes, raccoons, or even you in your apartment. You have a home range, you defend a territory, you know your streets. These new city birds are doing the same thing. Smaller worlds, tighter boundaries, more like a squirrel guarding a tree than a goose crossing continents. How's that for a dinosaur makeover? A creature built to ride the jet stream, slowly turning into a street-smart, year-round resident animal. If migration fades away, the body can follow. Wings can shrink, legs can get stronger, senses can tune to nightlife and traffic instead of stars and trade winds. And losing that giant annual journey is just step one. Because once a bird's world shrinks from a whole hemisphere down to a few city blocks, evolution suddenly has permission to sculpt a totally different kind of animal. And in some places, it already has a head start. And once evolution is stuck inside a few city blocks, it starts getting weird fast. Imagine a blackbird that used to live in a quiet forest, singing to a few neighbors at dawn. Move it into downtown traffic, sirens, construction, that endless car hum, and suddenly its love song is competing with a jackhammer. So urban songbirds crank the volume and twist the dial. They sing at higher pitches, and they shift their concerts to those rare quiet hours, late at night or very early morning, when the traffic dies down just enough for a mate to actually hear them. You'd think birds would just give up and move back to the woods, right? Nope. In cities across Europe and North America, scientists have recorded urban great tits, sparrows, and blackbirds using sharper, higher songs than their forest relatives. Same species on paper, totally different soundtrack in real life. And here's the important part. Young birds grow up hearing that city remix, copying it, and passing it on. Culture and genetics start to stack. But it's not just the music that's changing. Bodies are too. When your world is trees, long wings are great. You glide, you soar, you commute. When your world is alleyways, balconies, glass walls, and surprise buses, long wings are just crash sticks. So some urban songbirds are evolving slightly shorter, rounder wings that let them pull off tight, split-second turns around buildings and parked cars. It's like swapping a long-distance glider for a stunt plane. And then there are the beaks. Believe it or not, access to bird feeders, leftover fast food, and ornamental plants is literally reshaping faces. City blackbirds and finches in some studies have longer, differently curved beaks than nearby forest populations, better for poking into feeders, prying open food wrappers, or picking seeds off hard concrete. Evolution is basically saying, "Oh, you live on fries and sunflower seeds now? Cool, let me just update the hardware." Personality is on the table too. The birds that thrive in cities are the bold ones, the curious ones, the ones that will land right next to you on a bench and eyeball your sandwich like a tiny feathered raccoon. Shy birds stay in the shadows, get fewer snacks, and leave fewer chicks. Bolder, calmer birds handle noise, crowds, and constant surprise better, and those traits are partly heritable. Over time, you don't just get city birds that act like raccoons and rats. You get lineages that are genetically tilted toward that street-smart temperament. What if I told you that all of this can add up to something much bigger than just urban flavor? Different songs, different wings, different beaks, different brains. Given enough generations, those differences can stack until you have distinct city subspecies, or even full-blown new species, basically locked into concrete ecosystems. They're not just visiting our cities, they're being forged by them. But if skyscrapers and traffic can sculpt new kinds of birds, what happens in the most extreme human-made environment of all? Endless industrial farms and monoculture fields? Out here, the wildest evolution experiment isn't in some remote jungle. It's in the middle of a wheat field. Imagine standing on the edge of an industrial farm, a flat horizon of grain, clipped pastures, irrigation ditches like metal veins, and almost no trees in sight. It looks empty, but it's actually crawling with birds quietly trying out new careers. We've basically built a new kind of ecosystem. Endless artificial grasslands that didn't exist at this scale before humans. You'd think they'd be biological dead zones, just green deserts of corn and soy. Nope. The moment a tractor starts moving, the place comes alive. Starlings swarm behind the plow, cowbirds pace around cattle hooves, gulls wheel over harvesters the way vultures circle a carcass. These are birds, but they're feeding like opportunistic farm mammals. Watch a flock of starlings behind a plow and tell me they don't act like little feathered pigs. The soil turns, the worms and beetles pop up, and the birds rush in as a churning, pecking carpet. Cowbirds literally got their name by following bison and now cattle, snapping up insects kicked up by hooves, the same way small ungulates once grazed alongside giants on natural prairies. Some gulls have ditched the sea almost entirely to haunt fields and landfills, scavenging like rats and foxes rolled into one very loud, very bold creature. So what traits does this new farm frontier actually reward? First, ground foraging. If you're willing to walk, strut, and sprint across open dirt, you win. Second, you need nerves of steel around machines the size of houses. Birds that don't freak out at tractors, harvesters, and irrigation rigs can feed where the good stuff is. Third, you need a flexible diet. Seeds, insects, spilled grain, dead fish from canals, whatever. And finally, it really helps to move as a team. Big flocks can track where the plows are, mob predators, and overwhelm a food source in seconds. Believe it or not, we've basically invited birds to step into roles once filled by rodents and small hoofed animals in wild grasslands. Prairie dogs, voles, antelope, gazelles. They grazed, scavenged, followed herds, and turned plants and insects into moving meat. Now you've got starlings and gulls doing a budget version of the same job, converging on the same lifestyle from a totally different starting point. different skeletons, same playbook. Quick thought experiment. What if I told you that in a few thousand years, farm crows are as central to agriculture as cows are today? Imagine semi-tame corvids herded between fields to clean up pests, drop seeds, even haul tiny tools with custom-built beaks. Yeah, you heard me right. Bird tractors. How's that for a weird future food system? Speaking of, let's get back to it, because researchers are already tracking the early steps. We're seeing measurable changes in body size, behavior, even migration in some of these field birds as they lock onto farm life. And if artificial grasslands can push birds toward acting like mini-mammals, wait until you see what islands and oceans are doing. That's where birds start turning into something even stranger. So if fields can turn regular little songbirds into almost fake rodents, what happens when you zoom out and look at the whole planet? Imagine every empty niche on Earth as a job opening, and evolution is hiring. For some reason, birds keep getting the call back. Mammals and reptiles apply too, but birds are like that one candidate who can do 5 roles and commute anywhere. A big part of it is simple. They fly. Flight is a cheat code. You'd think oceans and mountain ranges would be hard borders for most animals, and for mammals, they usually are. But a bird can ride a storm, cross hundreds of kilometers of open water, and just show up on a brand new island. Once they land, they're not stuck as just a flying creature. They can drop flight, bulk up, stretch their legs, and suddenly you've got a ground predator or a grazing giant. On top of that, birds run evolution on fast forward. Many species breed every year, sometimes multiple times, with lots of chicks. Short generations mean natural selection can tweak things quickly. Beak length, body size, feather shape, even behavior. Believe it or not, those feathers are like Swiss Army knives. They start as flight tools, but they can be repurposed for insulation, waterproofing, display, silent hunting, or swimming, like penguin flippers turning a flying wing into a seal-style paddle. Now compare that with mammals. We're impressive, sure, but we tend to be more locked in. A bat is a bat. A whale is a whale. A mouse is a mouse. Big specialized bodies, long pregnancies, fewer babies. Not exactly a recipe for rapid reinvention. And most mammals can't just hop an ocean to colonize some remote rock in the middle of nowhere without a boat and snacks. When you see mammals on far-flung islands, a lot of the time, guess who brought them? Us. Reptiles have a different limitation. They're great at surviving in tough places, but their metabolisms are slow, and many have longer lifespans and slower reproduction. Evolution still works. It's just walking instead of sprinting. So you don't see lizards repeatedly turning into the island's main grazer, top predator, and weird semi-aquatic thing as often as birds do. Put it all together, and birds end up as evolution's favorite problem solvers. Mobility plus fast generations plus modular anatomy. Beaks you can reshape. Feathers you can rewire. Skeletons you can lighten or thicken. Means whenever a niche opens up, somewhere, some bird lineage is in a better position to grab it first. And here's the uncomfortable question. If birds are this adaptable, are we actually watching the early steps of them moving into our roles too? What if I told you that in cities, farms, even at garbage dumps, some bird species are already starting to act a lot like us, exploiting our waste, our buildings, our schedules, and the next section is where that gets really weird. So if birds are already learning our schedules and raiding our trash, you have to wonder, could any of them ever get, well, kind of like us? Not the whole skyscrapers and smartphones package, but human-level problem-solving, planning, even culture. Believe it or not, some of them are already uncomfortably far along that road. Corvids and parrots are the big names here. Ravens that stash food in hundreds of hiding spots and then remember them months later. New Caledonian crows that bend bits of wire into hooks to fish food out of tubes, as if a little feathered engineer woke up and chose violence against puzzles. African gray parrots that can label objects, count, and even understand that none means zero. You'd think we were talking about toddler humans, not a creature that also screams at ceiling fans. And it's not just party tricks. These birds plan for the future, understand cause and effect, and navigate really complex social lives. They watch who cheats, who shares, who's dominant, and they change their behavior based on that information. That kind of social chess is exactly the stuff that pushed primate brains, including ours, into the big thinking league. Here's the twist. Bird brains don't look like mammal brains. No wrinkly cortex. No obvious, this part does math label. For a long time, scientists assumed that meant they just couldn't reach the same cognitive ceiling. But imagine opening up a tiny skull and finding it absolutely crammed with neurons. Songbirds and parrots pack neurons in their forebrains at densities that would make a primate jealous. Smaller, lighter, but insanely efficient. How's that for an evolutionary life hack? So what kind of world actually rewards that kind of intelligence? You need unstable environments, shifting food sources, predators, competitors, and, most of all, a messy social scene. In other words, cities. Urban crows and pigeons already recognize human faces, time their foraging to traffic lights, and learn to open bins or ride air currents between buildings. They're exploiting new resources, new shelters, new rules, faster than we can write them down. Give that a few million years, and you start to picture future lineages of city crows or parrots filling the same roles that monkeys and apes once did in forests. Maybe long-legged, ground-running corvids haunting garbage dumps like clever little primates. Maybe forest parrots in fragmented habitats evolving stronger feet and tool use to pry open every last food source. Yeah, you heard me right. We're basically describing bird people, minus the business suits. But here's the gut punch. While we're daydreaming about super smart future birds, a lot of today's smartest lineages are in serious trouble. Parrots are hammered by the pet trade and habitat loss. Many corvids are poisoned or persecuted as pests. Some of the very species running these wild experiments in intelligence are down to tiny, fragile populations. What if I told you that, just like our rarest mammals and that pale blue macaw we almost lost, many of these brainy birds might vanish before evolution finishes the story it started. And the next part of this video is where that gets even darker. And here's where it stops being a cool thought experiment and starts feeling like a crime scene. Imagine all those bird lineages we've talked about as long, weird science projects running for millions of years. The dodo on Mauritius wasn't just a funny-looking chunky pigeon. It was midway through becoming the island's ground mammal. No native hoofed animals, no monkeys. So a bird steps in as the clumsy, beak-armed grazer. Same with those island rails across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Over and over, they dropped flight, bulked up legs, and turned into little feathered rodents, scurrying through leaf litter like they owned the place. Then humans show up, and the experiment just stops. You'd think something as huge and powerful as Haast's eagle in New Zealand would be untouchable. This was a raptor so big it hunted human-sized moa, basically the island's stand-in for deer or antelope. In ecological terms, it was a big cat with wings. But give people a few centuries of habitat burning, moa hunting, and later introduced mammals, and that whole predator-prey system collapses. Moa gone, eagle gone. An entire branch of fake mammal birds erased in what, evolutionarily, is yesterday afternoon. That's the brutal part, the speed. Forests cleared in a lifetime, not an ice age. Hunting pressure ramped up with guns instead of claws. Rats, cats, pigs, and dogs spilling off ships and into ecosystems that had never seen a mammal that could climb, dig, or squeeze into a nest. Whole lineages vanish in a couple hundred years or less. On a 150 million year bird timeline, that's not even a blink. That's a glitch. And we don't just lose what they were. We lose what they were going to be. Believe it or not, given another 2 or 3 million years of isolation, those rails might have become even more mole-like, with reduced eyes and insane digging feet. The dodo's descendants could have split into sleek, fast runners and heavy, armored bruisers. Haast's eagle might have evolved into something even stranger, a super-specialized hunter keyed perfectly to forest light and moa behavior. We'll never know. Those chapters got ripped out before they were written. Now look at today's endangered birds, island parrots with tiny ranges, penguins pinned between warming oceans and melting ice, songbirds that only live on one mountain ridge. These are active experiments right now, trying to solve new problems: heat, storms, cities, plastics. And the risk is we cut them off the same way. Habitat gone, invasive predators in, population down to zero before evolution even has time to answer. Pattern interrupt for a second, because it's not all doom. Remember Spix's macaw, that pale blue ghost from Brazil? Extinct in the wild, numbers in captivity under 200, and yet coordinated breeding and habitat work actually put them back into their home forest. And they bred. In the wild. How's that for a plot twist? Speaking of, let's get back to it, because that little win just shows the stakes. When we lose a bird species, we're not only losing a rare creature, we're shutting down an entire future of possible animals it could have become. So the question is, which experiments are we going to let keep running? So when we talk about saving birds, we're not just doing museum work. We're choosing which branches of the dinosaur family tree get to keep growing, twisting, and trying weird new shapes in the future. There's a name for this: evolutionary distinctiveness. Some birds sit on long, lonely branches of the tree of life with no close cousins left. You'd think all species are kind of equal here, but no. Losing a super distinct lineage is like deleting an entire folder of tools from evolution's hard drive, not just tossing one file in the trash. Take the kakapo, for example. This giant, moss-green, flightless parrot from New Zealand is basically what you'd get if an owl, a rabbit, and a feathered potato merged into one confused creature. It's the last of its kind. No backup species. No discount kakapo waiting in the wings. When conservationists move them to predator-free islands, track every bird, and even collect sperm with tiny parrot helmets, they're not just saving a funny nocturnal bird, they're keeping an entire evolutionary experiment online. Same with California condors. These massive scavengers, with 9-foot wingspans and heads that look like someone half-finished the paint job, are one of the last survivors of a really old group of New World vultures. When their numbers crashed to just 27 birds, we almost lost that whole aerial cleanup crew blueprint. Captive breeding, GPS tags, and painstaking releases into wild canyons have pulled them back from the edge. Believe it or not, that means future ecosystems still get the option of giant desert scavengers that can ride thermals for hours, searching for whatever big animals we haven't wiped out yet. Island rails tell the same story, but in miniature. Over and over, rails reach islands, ditch flight, and turn into little ground mammals in everything but DNA. When we fence off habitat, remove invasive rats and cats, and keep those tiny populations going, we're protecting a process, not just a product. We're saying, evolution, you can keep running this turn a bird into something else script. And it's not only about the birds themselves. Habitat corridors that link forests, wetlands, and coastlines let populations mix, spread, and split. Protected areas give them safe spaces to specialize, to fail, to try again. Controlling invasive species stops every island from turning into the same rat and pigeon theme park. All of that is raw oxygen for future diversification. So imagine fast-forwarding a few million years, the kakapo's descendants roaming as chunky, ground-dwelling seed farmers in new forests, condor-like birds turning into even larger bone-cracking skywolves over expanding deserts, city pigeons evolving into hyper-adapted urban specialists with night vision and smog-proof lungs. What if I told you that the choices we make about conservation now decide which of those futures even has a chance to exist? Because if birds are evolution's favorite shapeshifters, then saving them isn't just about what they are. It's about everything they might still become next. And here's the weird part. A lot of the time, the first ones to notice birds starting down one of those new paths, it's not the scientists with grants and GPS tags. It's the farmer who's just trying to keep something out of his corn. Imagine a coastal village where the fishers swear the gulls have learned a new trick this year. They're not just stealing scraps at the dock anymore. They're following the boats miles offshore, timing their dives with every haul of the net, grabbing stunned fish before they even hit the deck. You'd think that would show up in a research paper first, right? Nope. It usually starts as someone at the pier saying, "The birds are getting smarter." Same thing in cities. A new type of crow that only hangs around drive-thrus. Pigeons that don't just pick at crumbs, but wait for motion sensors to open supermarket doors and then raid the bread aisle like tiny feathered burglars. Local people give them nicknames, swap stories, complain about the mess. Years later, a grad student shows up and goes, "Believe it or not, these birds have measurably different habits, different routes, sometimes even different beak shapes from their country cousins." Out in the countryside, farmers notice swallows shifting their migration, arriving weeks earlier, nesting in new places, chasing different insects because the old ones don't hatch at the same time anymore. Nobody calls it rapid evolutionary response to climate change on the porch. They just say, "The birds aren't like they used to be." But those comments? They're like little early warning sirens for scientists who finally come in with banding, genetics, the whole toolkit. And in really remote places, those stories can be the only data we have. A fishing community that talks about a new seabird that only eats around fish farms. Island residents who swear there's a strange ground bird in the scrub that runs like a mammal and barely flies at all. For a long time, those tales live as rumors. Then someone finally photographs it, or finds different bones in an owl pellet, and suddenly we're talking about a population that's already halfway to becoming a brand new kind of animal. This isn't just modern gossip either. Indigenous stories from New Zealand describe giant eagles that dropped down from the sky and killed people. For a while, Western scientists treated that like myth, as if a giant murder eagle would be too much for reality. Then they dug up Haast's eagle, a real bird big enough to hunt human-sized moa, basically the island's stand-in for a big cat. So what if I told you that somewhere right now, someone is telling a story like that? A trash can hawk, a boat shadow gull, a running owl that doesn't quite fit the field guide. And one day, a future scientist is going to look back and realize that was the first chapter of an entirely new evolutionary experiment. The question is, What kind of creature are they quietly watching evolve today? And would we even recognize it yet? And here's the twist that kind of breaks your brain a little bit. You don't have to wait 1,000,000 years to watch evolution happen. Sometimes you just need a good drought, a weird El Niño year, or a new city park full of bird feeders. You'd think evolution is this slow, ancient process that only lives in museum diagrams and dinosaur documentaries, right? Believe it or not, we've watched real birds evolve in real time, on human timescales, with tape measures and notebooks instead of time machines. Tiny changes, sure, but they stack. Take Darwin's finches on the Galapagos. Classic textbook creatures, sure, but the reality is way more intense than the cute drawings. During brutal droughts and then soaking El Niño years, scientists followed the same finch families, banded and numbered, for decades. When the drought hit, only birds with slightly deeper, stronger beaks could crack the tough leftover seeds. A few millimeters meant the difference between starving and surviving. In just a couple of generations, the average beak size of the whole population shifted. Not in theory, in measurements. Parents with big beaks had more chicks. Those chicks had big beaks, and the graph on the scientist's clipboard literally slid to the right. Then the weather flipped. Softer seeds came back, and suddenly smaller. More precise beaks had the edge, so the graph slid back again. How's that for evolution on fast forward? And it's not just beaks. Body mass changes with food booms and crashes. Birds that breed earlier as springs warm up are raising more chicks than their late neighbors, so the alarm clock of the whole population is slowly rewiring. In cities, blackbirds and sparrows are evolving shorter wings that make dodging cars and buildings easier, and some have longer, narrower beaks that work better on the strange buffet of human food and bird feeders. Same species name, different animal in practice. Imagine the birds in your neighborhood right now. The pigeons under the bridge, the crows on the power line, that one aggressive gull that absolutely owns the parking lot. We treat them like static characters in the background, but each generation is a tiny remix. Different songs to cut through traffic noise, different timing of nesting to match trash day schedules, different bodies tuned to heat waves and cold snaps. Pattern interrupt. Close your eyes for a second and time-lapse one common bird you know, like a city pigeon, over 1,000,000 years. Feathers blurring, bones stretching, beak warping as the climate swings, predators come and go, oceans rise, forests vanish, and maybe your pigeon ends up looking more like a long-legged shore hunter or a chunky, flightless grazer. Yeah, you heard me right. That boring sidewalk bird is a prototype. And if this is what we can see in just a few decades with a ruler and some patience, what happens when we crank the clock forward and really let evolution run wild on birds? So here's the weird question hiding under all of this. If a bird ends up looking, acting, and living like a totally different animal, at what point do our labels stop making sense? If your pigeon prototype turns into a fake seal or a skywolf, is it still a bird? Or are we just clinging to the name out of habit? Imagine trying to turn a smartphone into a refrigerator using only duct tape and software updates. That's basically what evolution is dealing with. It doesn't get to start from scratch. It has to tinker with whatever is already built. Birds descended from small, feathered dinosaurs, so they're stuck with that starter kit. Beaks instead of jaws with teeth, feathers instead of fur, wings instead of hands. You'd think, okay, give it enough time and a penguin could just become a seal. But the bird toolkit is missing some parts. Mammals have mammary glands, hair, and true complex teeth that grow from deep in the jaw. Bird embryos don't have the developmental wiring for any of that. They can't just flip a switch and grow udders or a full set of mammal-style molars, because those instructions were never in their genetic manual to begin with. On top of that, they're locked into some big design choices. Most birds lay hard-shelled eggs. That means their reproduction is built around external eggs, not pregnancies and placentas. Their skin is organized to grow feathers, not fur. And their skeleton is this super-specialized, hollow-boned flight frame with fused bones and a keeled breastbone. Even when they lose flight, like ostriches or kiwis, you can still see the airplane frame under the hood. Penguins are a perfect example of how far you can push it without leaving birdhood. They've traded flight for swimming, turned wings into flippers, packed on blubber, and now fill a niche that feels very seal-adjacent. But crack open the anatomy, and it's bird all the way down. Feathered skin, bird lungs, bird bones, bird eggs. It's convergent evolution in action, solving the same ocean problem with a different ancestral body. Believe it or not, the same thing happened on land with some truly wild birds. The dodo on Mauritius basically became the island's chunky ground mammal, big, flightless, waddling around, eating fruit like a pig with feathers. In New Zealand, Haast's eagle grew into this massive predator that hunted human-sized moa, filling the role of a big cat or wolf, but in the sky. Different lifestyles, same dinosaur lineage. So convergent evolution can make things look similar on the outside, but deep ancestry doesn't budge. A bird can fake being a seal, a grazing mammal, or a land predator, yet its bones, eggs, and DNA keep shouting bird. What if I told you that in some places, birds have pushed these limits so hard they basically rebuilt entire lost ecosystems by themselves? That's where we're headed next. So if a bird can fake being almost anything, that raises a weird question. When does it stop feeling like a bird to us? Imagine standing on an Antarctic ice sheet, wind screaming in your ears, and the only birds around are tuxedoed torpedoes rocketing through black water like tiny submarines. No trees, no songs, no fluttering wings. Your brain kind of rebels. You'd think, okay, that's a seal in cosplay, not the same thing as the robin in my backyard, right? We do this all the time. A fluffy garden songbird? That's our default. A kiwi shuffling through the dark like a snuffling mammal, laying an egg the size of its own head? Suddenly we're like, what is this creature even trying to be? Auks that dive like fish, cormorants that spend more time underwater than in the air, marine birds that can go months without touching land at all. Emotionally, they start drifting out of the neat mental box labeled bird. But biology doesn't care about our boxes. In science, being a bird is about ancestry, not vibes. If you're descended from that one surviving dinosaur branch, the theropod lineage that gave us the first true birds, you're in the club, no matter how weird you look. So a hummingbird hovering like an insect and a penguin waddling like a drunk toddler are equally, fully, boringly bird. Same basic skeleton, same style of feathers, same kind of eggs, same deep-time family tree. Believe it or not, our mental image of bird is incredibly narrow. It's shaped by whatever lands on the feeder, not by the full cast. We think sparrow, pigeon, maybe a hawk if we're lucky, and quietly ignore that birds also include giant extinct island monsters that hunted like wolves, and flightless grazers that basically became cows with beaks. Our brains lag behind reality, stuck on the common and cute, while evolution keeps cranking out the rare and the deeply strange. And that lag is only going to get worse. As evolution keeps working, some future bird lineages might slide so far into new roles they'll feel as alien to us as the classic movie dinosaurs did before we knew many of them were fluffy, feathered, and weirdly bird-like. Picture city crows with even bigger brains, acting like little primates on power lines. Or coastal birds so committed to the ocean they give up land forever, becoming sleek, warm-blooded fish that just happen to lay hard-shelled eggs. What if I told you that, from evolution's point of view, that creeping unease we feel, that "is this still a bird's reaction?" is a sign something big is happening? Because as these lineages morph and split, they're not just messing with our categories. They're quietly rewriting the future of entire ecosystems. And in the final stretch, we're going to zoom out and ask a harder question. If birds keep reinventing life on Earth, what exactly are we doing to that story? And how much of the next chapter is really up to us? So let's zoom all the way out. If evolution had a backup hard drive for life on Earth, birds are the files that somehow never get corrupted. When that asteroid slammed into the planet 66 million years ago, it didn't just delete the big, flashy dinosaurs. It torched forests, choked the sky with dust, and crashed food webs from the top down. You'd think that would be game over for delicate, hollow-boned creatures that literally live in the air, right? Believe it or not, one small branch of feathered dinosaurs, the ancestors of modern birds, squeaked through. Why them? Mobility, timing, and weirdly flexible diets. The birds that survived were probably small, ground-living, and not picky eaters. While giant plant-eating dinosaurs starved, these little survivors could peck seeds, insects, carrion, whatever they could find. Then, as the dust settled and the world started to green up again, they turned into flying gardeners. They ate the first recovering plants and then dropped seeds in their poop, helping forests reseed and spread over continents that had just been scorched. Imagine that. Flocks acting like airborne cargo ships, hauling plant DNA over dead landscapes, stitching the planet's green skin back together. Every time a bird swallowed a berry and took off, it was literally exporting a future forest to some new patch of dirt. And they haven't stopped doing that. New volcanic island? Birds are among the first animals to show up, riding the wind, dropping seeds, insects, and, yes, a lot of fertilizer. Fresh lava flows, clear-cut forests, abandoned mines, even urban ruins after a disaster. Birds move in fast. They sample whatever food appears, shift their diets on the fly, and start rebuilding food webs from the top down and the bottom up at the same time. That mobility plus flexibility is why birds are so good at colonizing weird new habitats. Pigeons turning city sidewalks into their personal savanna, gulls learning to raid landfills, hawks hunting between skyscrapers like they're cliffs. These are little previews of how birds handle chaos. What if I told you that in a future of climate swings, fires, and floods, birds are probably going to be some of the first lineages to adapt, move, and radiate into new forms again? And that loops back to their habit of evolving into other animals. When big predators vanish, some birds bulk up into eagle wolves. When mammals can't handle a new shoreline, penguin seals dive in. When islands lose their ground mammals, rails and other birds keep reinventing themselves as feathered rodents, kangaroos, you name it. They're like evolution's temp agency, constantly filling whatever role just got vacated. Pattern interrupt for you. Imagine a future nature documentary, millions of years from now, narrated by not us. The voice calmly explains. For a brief moment, one primate thought it ran the show. Cities flared, oceans warmed, and then that experiment faded. But the birds, they were there before, during, and long after, quietly rewriting ecosystems every time the world reset. So if birds are the planet's backup plan, The uncomfortable question is, what kind of mess are we backing up from? In the next part, we're going to stop time traveling and talk about the one extinction event we can actually control, the one we're causing right now, and what, if anything, we're going to do about it. So let's zoom way in. We've been throwing around words like mass extinction and 150 million years, like that's normal, but where do you actually fit in that timeline? Imagine the entire history of birds, from the first little dinosaur fluffball gliding through Jurassic ferns to the penguins and parrots you know today, stretched out as a movie that's 2 hours long. Your whole life? An 80-year human lifespan is less than a single frame. Blink, and you're gone. You'd think that means you don't matter to evolution at all, right? Believe it or not, you matter a lot. Here's the catch. Evolution is slow, but the things that shape evolution can change fast. You will never watch a sparrow gradually turn into some new, weird land penguin in your backyard. That's not how this works. What you can see are the opening moves. City blackbirds growing shorter wings and singing over traffic. Island rails losing flight. Penguins turning into fake seals that fly underwater. Those early shifts are evolution's test runs, and they're happening inside your lifetime. And we're not just innocent spectators with popcorn. We are the scriptwriters and the set designers. Every time you choose what to eat, what to buy, who to vote for, which conservation project to support, you're quietly tugging at the decision tree of millions of bird lineages. More forests protected? More options. More oceans filled with plastic and long lines. Fewer options. It's like we're either giving evolution a giant toolbox or taking the tools away one by one. Think about the vaquita's home in the Gulf of California, or the last scraps of forest where a rare parrot hangs on. When we drain wetlands, light up the night sky, warm the climate. We compress the future into a narrow hallway where only a few tough, city-proof, heat-proof creatures can squeeze through. When we protect habitat, reconnect rivers, or just let a patch of land stay messy and wild, we blow that hallway open into a whole maze of possible future animals. So where do you fit? You're not outside the story looking in. You're in the cast, and you're also part of the asteroid. Yeah, you heard me right. Our species is hitting ecosystems hard enough to knock out entire branches of the bird family tree. But at the same time, we're also the habitat creators, the people who plant corridors, tear out old nets, fund breeding programs, and decide which rare creatures get a second shot. What if I told you that, in a very real way, you're choosing which birds your great-grandkids will grow up with? Silent skies full of just a few tough survivors, or a noisy, chaotic planet where evolution still has room to get weird. In the final part, we're going to pull all of this together and ask the question that really matters. What kinds of future birds do we actually want to share the Earth with? And what are you willing to do about it? So, let's zoom out for a second, because this whole story is way bigger than some birds are kind of weird. We started with dinosaurs, real ones, small, feathered theropods that survived the asteroid and, instead of giving up, just kept shrinking, lightening their bones, turning arms into wings, and becoming the first true birds. Imagine the last non-bird dinosaurs dying out, while this one scrappy branch quietly decides to try everything. Fast forward a few million years, and suddenly birds are not just dinosaurs with feathers. They're evolution's cosplay champions. Penguins ditch flight, bulk up with dense bones and a layer of fat, and start flying underwater like fake seals. You'd think losing the ability to fly would be a downgrade, right? Nope. In the Southern Ocean, they basically become the small marine mammals of the bird world, torpedoing after fish, while the real seals look on like, competition? Then we met the dodo, A pigeon that moved to an island and reinvented itself as a ground pig. It got chunky, lost flight, walked around Mauritius vacuuming up fruit, and trusted everything, including the humans that would wipe it out. Haast's eagle in New Zealand went the opposite way, turning into a sky lion. Believe it or not, this thing was big enough to kill human-sized moa, dropping out of the clouds like a flying big cat with talons. And rails? Rails are serial ground mammals. They keep colonizing islands, putting their wings in airplane mode, and evolving into little feathered rodents or mini deer, running through grass instead of trees. It's the same basic toolkit every time. Beaks that can be reshaped into pliers, spears, sieves, feathers that work as insulation, display, or wings, hollow bones and fast reproduction so evolution can test a new design, hit undo, and try again. Islands turned out to be nature's favorite secret lab, but they're not the only one. Cities are doing it now too. Urban blackbirds are already evolving shorter wings and different songs to deal with traffic noise and glass towers. Farms create open fields where some birds turn into crop-following grazers. Warming oceans and shifting seasons are pushing others to migrate differently, breed earlier, or starve. What if I told you we are basically speed-running millions of years of change in just a few human lifetimes? And here's the twist. All that creative potential runs straight into a wall of extinctions. Every time we clear a forest, drain a wetland, or flood an island with rats and cats, we're not just killing birds. We're canceling entire future experiments. No more fake seals, no more sky lions, no more strange city crows that might have learned to live alongside us in ways we can't even picture yet. So as we head into the final part, sit with that tension for a moment. This ridiculous, shape-shifting resilience on one side, and our ability to shut it down on the other. The question now isn't just, what are birds capable of? It's, which futures are we going to let them have? And yeah, you heard me right. That choice lands squarely in your lap next. So let's cash that out, because this isn't just a thought experiment about imaginary dino pigeons. If evolution is still sculpting birds right under our noses, which future bird do you think actually wins? Is it the hyper-adapted city scavenger, the new ocean predator, the desert specialist, or something so weird we haven't even got the vocabulary for it yet? Imagine a pigeon that's basically a feathery raccoon. Shorter wings for tight alley turns, a beak built like a can opener for trash cans, totally unfazed by traffic, sirens, or us. You'd think that sounds ridiculous, but city blackbirds are already evolving different beaks and shorter wings compared to their forest cousins. So tell me in the comments, are you team urban mutant, or are you betting on the oceans? Because out at sea, penguins already did the fake seal thing. Dense bones, flipper wings, layers of fat. They traded flight for underwater flight and turned into torpedoes. What if I told you warming oceans and shifting fish schools push some future bird to go even further, turning into a full-time marine hunter that barely hauls out on land at all? Do you see that as awesome or kind of terrifying, given what we've done to the seas? Or maybe your money's on the deserts. Picture a long-legged, heat-proof sprinter, like a roadrunner turned up to 11, sprinting between shrinking patches of shade, living off insects and whatever unlucky lizard crosses its path. Believe it or not, rails have already evolved into ground-dwelling, fake mammals over and over on islands, so birds going full land predator is not some sci-fi leap. I want to hear your favorite examples from this video too. Which creature stuck with you? Was it the island raptor acting like a big cat, the penguin a seal, or the little urban birds quietly rewriting their own bodies to survive concrete? And in your neighborhood, have you seen birds doing suspiciously non-bird things? Gulls stealing chips like seasoned thieves, crows using traffic to crack nuts, herons fishing in drainage ditches as if that's a normal river? Here's the part where you actually get to nudge the story. Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do is keep options open. Support a local conservation group, join a citizen science bird count, volunteer for a wetland cleanup or a nest box project. Every patch of habitat we keep intact is one more evolutionary branch that doesn't get snapped off before it even starts. And if you want more of this deep time, big picture stuff in your feed, liking, subscribing, and sharing really does matter. It pushes this kind of content into the algorithm instead of yet another top 10 cutest animals reel. How's that for quietly steering the future? Next time you see a sparrow on a sidewalk, a pigeon on a power line, or a gull screaming at a landfill, look again. That's a dinosaur mid-transformation, a living experiment in progress, part of a story that's going to keep unfolding long after we're gone. The only real question is, what kind of world are we handing them to evolve in? So here's the bonus thought that keeps me up at night. What if we're already looking at the next penguins, the next moas, the next absolutely ridiculous bird experiments, and we're just calling them seagulls and those annoying crows right now? Imagine you could time travel 60 million years back and point at some awkward little shorebird and say, yeah, that one's going to turn into a tuxedo torpedo that hunts fish like a fake seal. You'd get laughed out of the swamp. But that's exactly what happened with the ancestors of penguins. The wild part is, we can see similar pressure building in some birds today. Take cormorants, long necks, dagger beaks, already half committed to the whole underwater lifestyle. Now put them in overfished seas where you have to dive deeper, chase faster, and squeeze every calorie out of what's left. Give that a few million years, and, believe it or not, you might not recognize them. Denser bones for diving, flipper-ish wings, more fat, less flight. A budget penguin 2.0, forged by our empty oceans. Then you've got gulls, the birds we love to hate at landfills and parking lots. Right now, they're scavengers with wings, but look at the world we're handing them. Plastic-filled oceans, mountains of trash, cities leaking food 24/7. You'd think that would just make them a bit fatter and louder. But what if I told you that's exactly the kind of stable, weird niche evolution loves? You can almost picture some future, semi-flightless, trash-processing gull descendant waddling around coastal dumps, built to rip open packaging like a living recycling machine. And in the cities, watch the crows. These birds are already tool users, problem solvers, omnivores that treat human chaos like a buffet. They recognize faces. They learn traffic patterns. They drop nuts in front of cars to crack them. How's that for a bird brain? Now crank up urban sprawl, add climate stress, keep rewarding clever, bold, flexible behavior. You start drifting towards something that feels less like a classic bird and more like a feathered raccoon with a PhD in people. Can we say exactly what they'll become? No. Evolution doesn't work off a script. It just edits whatever survives. But we can see the direction of the pressure. Deeper dives for cormorants, dirtier oceans for gulls, smarter, denser cities for crows. The future shapes are hidden in those trends, even if the final designs are still a mystery. So next time you walk outside, try this. Don't treat the pigeons, sparrows, and crows as finished products. Treat every bird as a prototype, a work-in-progress design being tested in real time. You're not just bird-watching. You're previewing rough drafts of animals that might replace penguins, moas, or even us in some distant documentary. If you want to keep pulling on that thread, guys, one of the absolute best things you can do is dive into more stories about extinction, evolution, and these strange bird lineages. Click over to our deep dives on lost creatures, survival experiments, and the rare animals that are already telling us how the next chapter might look. So while you're imagining future penguin wolves and city crows outsmarting us, let me pull back the curtain for a second and show you how we actually built this whole story. Because none of this is just me sitting in a dark room going, "What if birds were sharks now?" This script is stitched together from a weird little mix of fields that don't usually get invited to the same party. We've got paleontology for the deep-time dinosaur stuff, evolutionary biology for how traits spread and stick, urban ecology for what's happening in our cities right now, and conservation research for who's actually out there counting these creatures before they vanish. You'd think those timescales are too far apart to connect, but when you zoom out, it's all one long experiment. On the fossil side, we leaned on the rock-solid, literally rock-solid record of how small theropod dinosaurs slowly morphed into the first true birds. Things like feather impressions, wishbones, and those hollow bones that make them such good flyers. That's where we get the confidence to say modern birds are dinosaurs, not just kind of like dinosaurs if you squint. Then we jump to the present with long-term bird monitoring projects. These are the unglamorous spreadsheets of science, banding programs, migration counts, city bird surveys that have been running for decades. Believe it or not, that's where we see blackbirds in cities evolving shorter wings, or urban birds shifting their songs to cut through traffic noise. It's not sci-fi, it's just data, stacked really high. We also pulled in newer studies on climate-driven and urban evolution, where researchers are tracking things like shifting ranges, changing beak shapes, or breeding earlier in warmer springs. That's how we can say, with a straight face, that evolution isn't just something that happened to dinosaurs. It's happening to pigeons on your street corner. Now, is every prediction in this video guaranteed? Absolutely not. There are big debates about how fast some of these changes can go, which lineages are most likely to diversify, and whether, say, island predators will evolve before we bulldoze their habitat. What if I told you scientists argue about this stuff constantly, and that's a good thing? The future bird wolf, or swimming fake seal, Penguin 2.0, is a thought experiment grounded in patterns we've already seen, not a spoiler for Episode 1 of Planet Earth 9. If you want to dig into the real papers, projects, and people behind this, check the description. We've linked further reading, citations, and organizations actually working with some of the bird groups we mentioned, from seabird rescue teams to urban ecology labs. Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do is follow those rabbit holes, because at the core, the idea is simple. Birds keep evolving into other animals because evolution never stops tinkering, especially when it gets a toolkit. This powerful: feathers, hollow bones, flexible beaks, fast brains. Yeah, you heard me right. The dinosaurs didn't just survive, they became the universe's favorite shapeshifters, and we're living right in the middle of their next big rewrite. So here's the part that kind of hits you in the chest. We've just spent all this time talking about how birds can become fake seals, ground mammals, even diet dinosaurs again. And it's amazing. But sitting right next to that awe is this quiet, heavy thing. All the lineages that never got to finish their story. Imagine the rails on islands that evolved into weird little feathered mammals, lost flight, owned the forest floor, and then met cats and rats and us. Gone? Or the Haast's eagle in New Zealand, this giant sky predator taking down human-sized moa like a flying big cat, extinct before we ever filmed it, before we really understood what that creature could be. You'd think a planet this big would have room for them. Turns out, not with the way we've been running it. Here's the perspective flip. We like to think of human history as the main plot. Cities, empires, space travel, social media meltdowns. But birds have been here, writing draft after draft of themselves, since the age of dinosaurs. Modern birds are literally the last dinosaurs, still tinkering, still changing, while our entire civilization fits into a tiny, razor-thin slice of their timeline. Blink, and we're the weird side quest in a 150 million year bird saga, and believe it or not, that's kind of comforting. Because even if we don't stick the landing as a species, some descendants of today's pigeons, crows, or penguins are probably going to keep going. They'll wear new shapes, grow new beaks, maybe lose flight, maybe gain it back in some strange way. On some future coastline, something penguin-ish might be filling a seal's role again. In some future city ruins, crow descendants might be the clever problem solvers picking through our leftovers like we were just another layer of rock. So where does that leave you and me, right now, in the middle of this? Weirdly, it gives us both humility and responsibility. Humility, because we're not the final chapter. We're a draft. A loud, messy, powerful draft, but still a draft. Responsibility, because we're currently the animal that decides which other animals even get the chance to keep evolving. How's that for a job description you didn't apply for? We can't stop extinctions completely. That's part of the game. But we can stop the pointless ones. We can choose not to turn every forest into a parking lot, not to fish every ocean dry, not to let rare, unique birds vanish before we've even figured out what they are. Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do is stay curious, pay attention, and support the people actually protecting habitat. And if you want to keep going down this rabbit hole of evolution and loss, don't stop here. I've got more deep dives on extinction, survival, and the strangest animals evolution has ever cooked up. Click over to the next video on your screen, and let's see what other creatures are trying to write their own next chapter. So if you're still here, brain buzzing with living dinosaurs and lost worlds, don't just let the story stop on this screen. Imagine this as a little branching point in the tree of your own watch history. You can go a few different ways from here, and each one shows you evolution getting squeezed, twisted, and forced to improvise. First option, right over here on the side of the screen, is a video on animals that are right at the edge. I walk you through some of the rarest creatures alive today, the ones with population charts that basically look like a cliff. You'd think almost extinct would mean boring, not much left to see. Right? Nope. These are sharks vanishing into deep water, Asian unicorns hiding in the last scraps of forest, and parrots trying to claw their way back from being extinct in the wild. It's what happens when evolution runs into us at full speed. Below that, you'll see a video that goes the other direction in time, straight back into the age of dinosaurs. That one is all about how a small, feathered theropod turned into the first true birds, and why that lineage never stopped changing. Believe it or not, once you see how penguins basically became fake seals, and how some island eagles hunted like big cats, you stop asking, "Are birds dinosaurs?" and start asking, "How's that for dinosaurs refusing to stay in one shape?" It's the prequel to everything we just talked about. And if you want something closer to home, click on the video about urban wildlife, probably popping up near the bottom. That one is all about the animals learning to live in our concrete ecosystems. City birds with different beaks and shorter wings than their forest cousins. Gulls timing their raids to trash trucks. Pigeons doing, well, whatever pigeons do. but slightly smarter every decade. What if I told you that right now, on your street, evolution is quietly rewriting what it means to be a city animal while you're just trying to get to work? Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do if you want more of these long-form documentary-style deep dives actually showing up in your feed is just subscribe. Hit the button, ring the little bell, all that classic YouTube ritual, and the algorithm is way more likely to surface the next weird creature story when it drops. If you know someone who still thinks birds are just birds, send this to them. Share it with the friend who loves dinosaurs, or the one who feeds pigeons in the park and has no idea they're hanging out with shape-shifting little survivors. Because birds aren't the end of the dinosaur story. They're the draft version of whatever comes next. Living dinosaurs, still in flux, still experimenting with the future. I'll see you in the next evolution story. Fade out.